From Montana's news leader, this is the MTN Noon News.
Good afternoon. Good to be with you. I'm Don Hudson. Ed McIntosh will join us in just a bit. Certainly a busy, or at least an active, weather day today, so you'll want to tune in for that. But first, a closer look on the impact to food banks really across Montana and the country as they brace for a decrease in food items due to USDA funding cuts. Now, that news comes after the Trump administration announced $1 billion in cuts to USDA programs in early March. Today, MTN's Vanessa Willardson hears from 2 Billings nonprofits on how they're coping with the uncertain future.
It just seems like the most vulnerable that could lose the most out of these cuts are the ones that are going to get hammered.
Montana food banks are anticipating the effects of funding cuts to the Emergency Food Assistance Program. Montana Food Bank Network lost 40% of its TFAP funding in March. That's 600,000 pounds of food or 900,000 cans of this soup.
Billings Family Service is one of MFBN's partner agencies, and it is losing an estimated 140,000 pounds worth of TFAP food this year. Program Manager of Warehouse Development, Debbie Anderson, says while the TFAP cuts did not show up in the last shipment of TFAP food, the organization will see reductions in the upcoming shipment, especially on protein.
And unfortunately for Montana, protein is kind of high on the list for Montana's diet preferences.
Billings Family Service may turn to the community for assistance due to the loss. In fact, Family Service Board member Ed Uladolin says while the impact of the cuts concerns him, he hopes the organization will find support from local residents and businesses.
We want to continue to broaden our support in the community, both from people that are supporting us financially, but also businesses that are supporting in terms of giving food and that type of thing.
President and CEO of MFBN, Gail Carlson, says the number of Montana residents asking for assistance is growing, despite the cuts in funding. She says some reasons for the increase include high grocery prices and federal employee layoffs, like the 360 U.S. Forest Service employees laid off in February.
We're starting to see a lot of demands on our partner agencies for needing that assistance because a lot of individuals have been laid off that are federal employees.
The CEO is finding ways to stay positive. She predicts food banks will figure out ways to fill the need.
Out of all the organizations I've worked with, food banks are probably the most resilient, and they'll find a way. They're going to find a way so that they don't ever have to turn away anyone that needs their services.
In Billings, Vanessa Willardson, MTN News.
Doppler radar has been very busy. It started last evening, and this is since 6 a.m. this morning. Areas of rain, snow showers. Some of this has been fairly heavy, starting to shift over with some heavier rain now towards the Glasgow area, and wind is going to be a concern across the eastern plains. But check out some of the accumulations we've had so far. This is the last 24 hours. So Missoula, you're actually a little higher because you had some very early yesterday, and then an inch and a quarter in Great Falls, over an inch in Helena. You can see right close to that inch mark in Lewistown, half inch certainly around Bozeman today. So some localized flooding concerns, more rain on the way. We'll talk about the forecast details coming up.
Ed, thank you very much. It's now time for news making headlines on this Monday. This afternoon, we're learning new details about the 7 people who were killed in a deadly collision that happened just outside of Yellowstone National Park. The tourists who were killed were all from either Italy or China, and the Chinese consulate general, by the way, in San Francisco now says that 8 Chinese citizens were injured in that crash. This is video of the aftermath of the fiery collision that happened there. 14 occupants were inside the tour van, the driver licensed in California. The names and ages of those killed in the van have not been released, but the driver of the truck has been identified as 25-year-old Isaiah Moreno from Texas. That crash happened 16 miles west of West Yellowstone. And for the 3rd time, the University of Montana ranked the #1 school for community public service. And they celebrated this past weekend in really the only way they know how, giving back. Around 10 different groups gathered all across campus to help beautify the area and the community. But don't worry, some fun was had as well with the event also featuring a musical festival. One of the dynamics that really defined this year's Montana legislative session was a split in the Senate Republican caucus. It really started on the first day and lasted throughout the entire session. MTN senior political reporter Jonathan Barian spoke to the two of the Republican senators, I should say, who repeatedly broke with their party's leadership about their perspective on what happened during the session.
On the first day of the Montana legislature's 2025 session, 9 Republican senators voted with Democrats to change the temporary rules the Senate was operating under. It was only the start of a session-long storyline.
That vote that was taken on day one was important. It was important to take a stand.
Senator Wendy McCamey of Great Falls was one of the 9 senators. As the session went on, she and the other 8 went on to vote against GOP leadership on numerous procedural motions, as well as some key legislation. Senator Josh Kazmaier of Fort Benton says one of the causes of the split was the 9's belief that leaders had isolated them by placing them on a less influential committee.
I think it just kind of got us off to a rough start when we actually changed the rules and made sure everybody was placed on committees that was fairly based on experience, knowledge.
McCamey says there were also policy differences, and she believed other members were subverting Governor Greg Gianforte's policy goals.
When I saw the lack of support and even opposition to our governor, that was an issue for me. And I wasn't opposed to taking a stand stating that.
The group of 9 didn't always vote as a bloc, but most of them supported the final budget plan, the homestead property tax reform bills, and renewing Montana's Medicaid expansion, positions many in their caucus opposed. However, Senate Republicans remained mostly united on other legislation, including income tax cuts and many social issues.
We're all conservative Republicans at the end of the day.
But the 9's actions led to sharp criticism from some Republicans. The Montana Republican Party's executive committee issued statements of censure and promised to withhold support from them for cooperating with Democrats. During an end-of-session news conference, Senate President Matt Regier said he didn't think the 9's constituents would approve of what they did.
I do believe the voters sent the Republican Party here to be in control, and from day one it was not. And I don't see that sustainable. I think that in the future, the voters are going to speak their mind.
Kazmaier and McCamey denied that they gave Democrats control of the Senate and said when going to their constituents, they'd stand on what they got done during the session.
Once the Montana starts seeing what we did, I think they should be pretty happy.
We can call them the Noble 9, we can call them whatever, but I'll own it. We'll be the 9.
In Helena, Jonathan Ambarian, MTN News.
Imagine owning your own town where you could be the mayor, you could be the mailman, you could run the general store, whatever your heart desires, because you own it. Well, right now in Montana, you have a chance as the town of Prey is on the market for $2.6 million. Now, Prey is located just south of Livingston near Chico Hot Springs. It isn't exactly bustling metropolitan. It is just 5 acres of land, population of really one family calling it home. However, despite its size, the town does have a small general store and a post office built in 1998. That has helped keep Prey's zip code alive. The town sold in 2018 for about $480,000, with the buyer then adding some new additions, including a couple of cabins, a septic system, and a renovated home. With that buyer moving out of state, Prey is now back on the market, and the realtor trying to sell the town says with a little fixing up, it could become a treasure state treasure.
I see Prey as a future community. So if we can sell to an owner who is ready to make this a spot with services for the community, that would be the highest and best use for this property.
Has some nice views there. Prey was founded in 1907 by Valentine Egger, and it was named after a congressman named Charles Nelson Prey.